told you, we're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Tonight, tracking Hurricane Debbie as Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas brace for historic rainfall and flooding. Then, after major sell-offs in U.S. and world markets, could a Fed rate cut be around the corner? On the CBS Evening News.
And I believe the Harris and Bashir ticket would be unbeatable. I believe both of them would just be such dynamic candidates.
It should be Josh Shapiro. I don't think this is a hard choice. He's a very talented politician. He's extraordinarily popular.
All parties must refrain from escalation. All parties must take steps to ease tensions.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Fears of an economic slowdown here in the U.S. did lead to a global market sell-off today. At home, the Dow closed the day over 1,000 points in the red. We'll have more ahead on this turbulent start to the week on Wall Street. But first, sources tell CBS News that Vice President Kamala Harris now expected to officially announce her running mate tomorrow morning. Over the weekend, Harris did interview her top picks, Governors Josh Shapiro, Tim Walz, Andy Bashir, and J.B. Pritzker. Also on the list, Senator Mark Kelly and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Once Harris reveals her choice, the newly minted ticket will set out on a 7-state battleground tour starting in my home state of Pennsylvania. Tracking all the latest is Caitlin Huey-Burns here in our studio and Nancy Cordes at the White House. Great to see both of you. Nancy, let's begin with you. Over at the White House, we understand that Vice President Harris's decision will come tomorrow. I know every reporter in town, including you, is trying to make it happen tonight by breaking that news. Not easy. What are you hearing?
Well, what we continue to be told, believe it or not, Robert, at this late hour, is that Vice President Harris still has not made her choice, even though we've also been led to believe that she is going to announce that choice in, I'd say the next 16 hours or so, probably sometime tomorrow morning. There will be an announcement, then there will be a video released introducing the country to this pick, whoever it is, and then she's appearing side by side with this individual at a rally in Philadelphia tomorrow evening. There on the screen, you've got those final 6 contenders. 3 of them at least met with Vice President Harris at her residence in Washington, D.C. yesterday. We've been told that there were others who also spoke with her, potentially virtually. We're not sure exactly how those meetings took place, but we can definitely tell you that the decision-making has moved into the final hours as we all await the news of who her VP pick will be.
Nancy, stay with us. Caitlin, what do we know about what the vice president's looking for her own vice presidential pick?
Well, there are a variety of different reasons people choose their running mates. We just saw, we've had 2 sweepstakes in as many months. And so we just saw, Trump, the reason that he picked J.D. Vance and an heir to his kind of MAGA ideology, but also can play in the Midwest. You showed on the screen there the contenders. You will notice the theme among them. They are all white men. That is designed to, speak to a kind of a demographic, perhaps, hole that this campaign is looking to fill. But when you look at some of the top contenders, it's really interesting to see where she is announcing this pick and why. Regardless if she picks Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, or not, the fact that they are launching this pick in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, 19 electoral votes, kind of tells you everything you need to know about where this campaign believes it needs to play, where the stakes are. It's also where the Trump team is really betting its campaign as well. So that could bode, well for someone like Shapiro or for someone like Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who could also appeal to the Midwest there.
And Nancy, CBS News has reporting that according to a source familiar with this process, the vice president is also having these formal interviews with candidates who have not been confirmed to the media. You hinted at that in your previous answer. What could be on the horizon in terms of a wild card, if any, at this point?
Right. You know, the campaign has always insisted that there are individuals on the short list that we don't know about and that we haven't reported. Hard to imagine that she would announce someone tomorrow who has never been on anyone's radar screen. That would be highly unusual. Just think about a few weeks ago when former President Trump made his pick. We knew that there were 3 finalists, thanks in large part to your own reporting. And we got word one by one. This one has been told they're not the pick. This one has been told they're not the pick. And now J.D. Vance has been informed that he is. And so I think it's unlikely that we're going to get some kind of surprise out of the blue tomorrow, that it's someone we never imagined. That's not how this campaign tends to operate. But what we do know is that they are going to spend quite a bit of time together. In fact, they're going to spend the entire week together, barnstorming the country, going from battleground state to battleground state, spending a lot more time at events together than, for example, we've seen Trump and Vance spend on the campaign trail. So it looks like they are definitely trying to send a message that they are a team. In fact, one of the criteria that we have always been told by the Harris campaign that is very important to her is that she picks somebody who can be a true governing partner, someone who she can really work with. And as someone who has spent the last 4 years as vice president herself, you can imagine why that trait would be very important to her.
It's interesting that they're going to be campaigning a lot together. It reminds me of Clinton and Gore in '92. They were presenting this, not just a ticket, but friends, it seemed, allies. Though it's not always the case. You think about the tensions between Dwight Eisenhower and Richard Nixon in 1952. Not always a perfect pair for these tickets. LBJ and JFK didn't love each other personally, even if they were political allies. Speaking of political allies, they matter in this process. Let's listen to Shawn Fain, the head of the United Auto Workers, who was on Face the Nation on Sunday.
My favorite's Andy Beshear from Kentucky. I mean, the man stood with us, on the picket line. He's been there for workers throughout every bit of our walk. He's won in a state where Mitch McConnell's from. I mean, it's been a red state traditionally, and he's won twice there.
They say in Washington, people like Shawn Fain are the great mentioners. The mentioners are the names, because this is a fluid process. Hey, Fain represents organized labor. Could it have an effect for organized labor to put their hand on the scale a little bit?
I mean, obviously, as you've done a lot of reporting on this as well, the union vote is kind of the prize demographic for both campaigns. The Trump campaign eagerly making that play, and especially with the selection of Vance. The UAW has already endorsed Harris, so it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't continue that kind of support for whoever she picks as her running mate. But that's a significant endorsement that she had secured, among others. And really, the idea that she is, likely to pick someone among that list that we showed, they're going to have, people are voicing their grievances with some. But what's been striking to see since she, essentially became the presumptive nominee is the rallying effect that the party has had around her. This is, a huge kind of contrast to how it was under Biden, when a lot of people were, questioning whether he should be the nominee. The money and the endorsements have all really lined up around her, and it's difficult to see any of those dissipating, no matter who she chooses.
And Nancy, quickly, in just the final minute, what do you say as a longtime reporter covering President Biden, Vice President Harris? What should we be paying attention to? 1 minute.
Well, this is one of those situations where it almost feels like one of those gender reveals where you're waiting not just to see whether you're going to get a pink sign or a blue sign, but you don't even know how you're going to get the sign, whether it's going to be confetti bursting out of a cake or some other signal that a choice has been made. So we know that there's going to be this video. We know that we're going to get some other form of announcement, but clearly the Harris campaign has been working very hard, Robert, to keep the exact plan under wraps. So we'll see how they choose to make this announcement tomorrow and what it says about what they want to convey going forward.
Well, I hope the reveal comes through a text message to Nancy Cordes. Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nancy Cordes, thank you. When President Biden exited the race, CBS News polling had him trailing former President Trump by 5 points. However, now that Vice President Harris is the presumed nominee, our latest numbers show a reset. It's Harris now with a 1-point edge nationally and across all the battlegrounds. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, take us through the numbers.
Hey there, Bob. The most important thing behind what you just showed is this increase in Democrats saying that they're going to vote. Once they come into the electorate like that, Democratic numbers go up. So, yeah, it goes from Biden down 5 to now what is effectively a neck-and-neck race, right? And I'll show you one more data point on that, Bob, and that is the key part of the Democratic base, black voters, now increasingly saying they're likely to vote, up to 74%. So that, in short, is what's moved the needle here for the Democrats, Bob.
Everyone's talking about Governor Shapiro. Could he add Pennsylvania? Where are you seeing the battleground states and what matters right now?
I want to point this out to you because, especially in light of all that's happened today in the markets, et cetera, I want to talk about the economy. This is something that hasn't changed in this race, which is Donald Trump being seen as if he wins, he'd make people financially better off, much more so in this case than Harris. But this was the same when Biden was at the top of the ticket. So that's something I think we want to watch. If Trump keeps that advantage or if Harris can cut into that in any way, I think that's really important, Bob.
And what about the economy? A lot of people on edge today about the market. So what does that mean for the political scene, if anything?
I think a couple of things. One is, take a look at what people say they know or don't know about Harris's policy positions, because obviously she's going to want to talk about the economy, talk about inflation. Now, is the Trump campaign going to be able to connect her to it? Well, you get 2/3 who figure, well, her policies and Biden's are mostly the same, but not entirely the same. So within that gap, and certainly the economy is going to fall in there, within that gap, I think is a key to watch over these next couple of weeks. Who defines that? Is it the Trump campaign? Is it the Harris campaign that does a better job, Bob?
And when you think about the vice presidential pick going to come within the next 12, 24 hours, what are you watching?
Well, here's what the voters are saying, and not all of them are political strategists, and not all of them have really, strong opinions here. Some 4 in 10 say it should be somebody from a battleground state. They're probably watching America Decides. They're political junkies. They know about that. And some say it should be liberal, not as much whether it should be a man or a woman. Look, the key is, are they going to be able to match the enthusiasm? Republicans were enthusiastic and still are about J.D. Vance, or at least satisfied. Most Republicans are enthusiastic or satisfied about J.D. Vance. So can the Democrats match that? History says that, yeah, at least in the short term, that they will, but we'll see.
Anthony, I do have to fact check you on one thing. You say the voters, not all of them are political strategists. Almost every voter I meet believes they're a political strategist.
and maybe they'll do a better job than anybody else, Bob.
Well, everyone has their view, as they should in this country. Anthony Salvanto, thank you. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has now declined to intervene in a long-shot lawsuit attempting to block legal proceedings in former President Donald Trump's New York hush money case. The court rejected Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey's bid to sue the state of New York. It was part of an effort to lift the former president's gag order and delay sentencing later this year. The suit had been widely panned as a political stunt. In the order, it was noted 2 conservative justices, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, would have allowed the state to at least file its lawsuit. A jury did convict Trump of 34 counts of falsifying business records, as you recall, back in May. Can Vice President Harris win over Republicans? The VP's campaign thinks it can, launching Republicans for Harris. Former Virginia Congressman Denver Riggleman is one of those crossing the political aisle. He will join us next on America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I use sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm
choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Vice President Kamala Harris is hoping to win over Republican voters opposed to the re-election of former President Trump. Her campaign now launching a program called Republicans for Harris. The campaign has revealed several endorsements for the VP from high-profile GOP figures from across the country, including our next guest, Denver Riggleman, formerly represented Virginia's 5th Congressional District, has advised the January 6th committee at a high level during its work in recent years, has recently worked with Hunter Biden as he has faced different legal issues. Congressman, always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Costa.
Congressman, I'm going to play a clip for you from a recent Trump rally where he talks about the Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp. Let's listen.
But Kemp doesn't want to end it because he's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. Little Brian Kemp, bad guy.
When you hear former President Trump, Congressman, go after a popular Republican governor like Brian Kemp, what does that mean for this group, Republicans for Harris, and for people like yourselves who have found themselves very uncomfortable with the direction of the GOP in the last decade?
Well, and thanks for having me. I think it's part of the equation why there are so many Republicans that are supporting Vice President Harris. I mean, Trump has always valued loyalty over competence. Look at the people that he hangs around with, you know, Kash Patel, Mike Flynn, Patrick Byrne, Roger Stone. I mean, these people are either felons or they're criminals or they're whack jobs. And I think that's really what, you know, President Trump is. He surrounds himself with sycophants and yes men and yes women. And real Republicans, you know, people who've served a long time, they're much more independent. And they look at what he's doing and even his policy positions, how he treats people, his misogyny. It's just ridiculous. And I just don't think that there should be people that are supporting felons, rapists, insurrections, or conspiracy theorists, or all the above. And when you get that full bag of crap right there that I just mentioned, there's going to be a lot of Republicans not voting for Trump this year.
What about Virginia? You know Central Virginia and Virginia so well, having run for office there and won. Is this a state that Democrats can really try to protect as part of the blue wall in the mid-Atlantic southern region of the country?
Yeah, I think Vice President Harris wins Virginia. I just don't think it's going to be that close of a race. I think you're going to see 4 to 6 points like you've seen in some of the last elections. And a lot of that has to do with, I do believe, Virginia's always been a pretty independently minded state. I know there's still 25 to 30% of Republicans who think President Trump is maybe clinically insane. So I think that's part of the allure of Vice President Harris. And it comes down to this. In Virginia, I do believe sanity still matters. And I'm hoping in the entire United States that sanity is the baseline for when people pick a presidential candidate or they vote for somebody. And I want to say right now, it's a 10-to-1 favor that Vice President Harris is beating President Trump in the sanity to the insanity category. And again, when you see what he says about, Kemp, or you see what he says about Kamala Harris herself and some of the racist remarks, there's just no way that people like me, and I think people like Adam Kinzinger and other individuals can support somebody like a Donald Trump.
Congressman, when you were working as a top advisor to the January 6th committee, you studied different extremist groups across the country. You studied conspiracy theories and how they're playing into our political discourse. And you also put an emphasis on democracy. President Biden, when he was in the Democratic race, in the presidential race, talked a lot about democracy. Do you believe Vice President Harris and this Republicans for Harris group are going to underscore that issue at every turn, or is that more of a Biden issue than a Harris issue? How do you see democracy playing out?
It's the number one factor for voting, and I think that's sort of why they have me here, is to actually go ahead and take a intellectual baseball bat to conspiracy theorists. I mean, you have a president or a former president who came out on Truth Social wearing a Q pen. Somebody said he's going to pardon the J6 rioters. It's just ludicrous. And, I'm the one who saw the text messages. It was our team, as you know. And when I called them the bourbon text, because you had to have a drink after you see the crazy of the Meadows text messages. But when you see the insanity in there, it's the same people in January 6th that are running things like Project 2025. It's not just what happened in the past, is that past performance is indicative of future performance. And when you see people like that still surrounding the former president, you got to think that his second term, if he were to be elected, is going to be insane. It's going to be chaos. It's going to damage our reputation globally. And I think it's going to damage our internal democratic institutions and structures. Again, that's why you're seeing Republicans for Harris right now, because there's no way we can allow that to happen, especially people like me who've seen the data. We've done the work. We've seen the facts-based insights, and we know how crazy that day was and how insane conspiracy theories drove a lot of those individuals to attack the Capitol that day. And that is not something that I want to see happen again.
Congressman, I've fully read your book, The Breach, where you detail all of the different movements across the country, how they're connected on a social media level, on the web in different ways. As you look ahead to November and post-election 2024, what concerns you, if anything, about what could happen in the post-election period if it does become a contested election?
Violence is always there, and it seems to have been normalized. I mean, we can look at the assassination attempt of the former president and say that's awful. We can look at what happened with Paul Pelosi. But you're seeing the type of language right now, the dehumanization in the language that's happening across the spectrum. I think it could get really nuts. And if Donald Trump loses, which I think he will, I do think you're going to see violence in state capitals. I think you're going to see certain individuals in certain areas going after specific politicians. Those are the things that frighten me. We know that it's happened in the past. We see the type of language today. We see the sort of this anti-Semitic pro-Nazi stuff. We see Islamophobes. We see so much going on right now in social media. And I think that's what scares people like me who study terrorism for so long, is that people like Donald Trump, who's that irresponsible, who talks about violence, who talks about, certain individuals or they're awful and things like that. It's absolutely irresponsible. And I do worry that 2024 is going to be, sadly, could be more violent than even January 6th.
An ominous warning. Congressman Denver Riggleman, author of The Breach, former advisor to the January 6th committee, among many other activities. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
U.S. stocks start the week in the red as Wall Street and world markets see a massive sell-off. We'll take a look at what's driving the global economic uncertainty. You're streaming America Decides.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7. It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
There are fears that we're entering the early stages of a possible recession. That was due to stocks plunging Monday. The Dow Jones fell 2.6 percentage points. Senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent, our friend and colleague, is here for analysis. Jolene, what's the reality of what has happened today on Wall Street?
The reality is today your 401k and a lot of investments took a pretty big hit. What we saw overall is that the Dow was down 2.6%, the S&P 500 down 3%. Overall, though, experts are saying that this is something that was coming in terms of a correction, so to speak. The tech-heavy NASDAQ officially in correction territory as of last Friday due to that jobs report coming in lower than expected. Now, the number of jobs added wasn't actually a bad number, but it missed what Wall Street was expecting. And as a result of that unemployment number ticking up, you saw the bad day on Wall Street on Friday, and then concerns of a possible early stage of recession here in the U.S. over the weekend. That then triggered a major sell-off in Japan, the Nikkei having its worst day, down 12% on Monday, and as a result, that continues to have an effect here on Wall Street for all major indices ending today in the red. But overall, the experts say, Bob, they say do not panic. Hold on, try not to look too closely at the markets. The idea is if you are investing is to hold on to your investments over the long term, and you will continue to see gains. Now, if you look back at the numbers too, over the past year, the past 12 months, all major indices are actually up by at least 9%. So even though we're seeing a day that's deep in the red today, and certainly a lot of tumbling across the markets, overall, if you continue to invest in that 401k and you're holding on, you're still going to be in a pretty favorable position, but certainly has a lot of people talking, including on the campaign trail, Bob.
Jolene, what are you watching now in the wake of all of this?
Yeah, I think the most important thing right now, and I was just in Washington, and we were at the Federal Reserve meeting last Wednesday. I asked Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, what is going to come next? How is he going to handle what's coming down the pike? And the market expectation right now is that the Fed may have acted a little too slowly. Maybe they should have cut interest rates last week, just a few days ago. And the idea now is that the market is pricing in not just a quarter point a cut in terms of rate cuts, but maybe a half a point, which would help a lot of people get back into the housing market when it comes to getting a mortgage that's slightly more affordable than it is now. We also see mortgage rates already coming down a little bit today. So the idea is when you look ahead to mid-September and that Federal Reserve meeting, we do expect a rate cut. That's something that the Fed has been telegraphing to us for a long time, but now that looks maybe that it could be a little bit more certain, Bob.
And just finally here in a minute, Jo Ling, when you were down covering the Fed, talking to the chair, what else were people really putting on his plate? What are they watching in terms of the Federal Reserve and what it could do next?
Well, of course, politics is the name of the game right now. You know that better than anyone else out there. So I asked Fed Chair Powell, look, there's a lot of criticism coming from former President Trump that if you do cut interest rates come September, that it'll be too close to the election, that the Fed should not do this. This is what the former president has said time and time again, especially on Truth Social lately. And what he said is that the Fed does not act in a political manner whatsoever. They do not account for any candidate when it comes to making policy going forward, making those interest rate decisions. So he says they're staying out of politics. They're looking just at the data. And you can bet the data they're looking at is inflation, jobs reports, anything related to the labor market and stabilizing prices. Those remain, according to the Federal Reserve, the core tenets of what they're trying to achieve. So if you were to look at what to expect, a mid-September rate cut of possibly half a point is very much on the table, according to those who are following this day in and day out here in the markets and looking at what the future could hold, Bob.
Great reporting. It's a good point that even if the Fed doesn't see it that way, politics always hovers near monetary and economic policy. Jo Ling Kent, thank you so much for your reporting. It's nearly decision day for Vice President Kamala Harris as she weighs who will be her running mate. Our political panel standing by to take a closer look at the contenders your streaming America decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7
that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The road ahead is not easy. We may stumble. We may fall short. But I pledge to you that we will act boldly and deal with our challenges honestly.
That was then Senator Kamala Harris 4 years ago this month, just after being tapped to join the Biden campaign. Now it's her turn, with her VP announcement just a few hours away. Who knows when that news will actually break? Let's bring in our political panel, Ashley Etienne and Maura Gillespie. Ashley served as communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris. Maura is a Republican strategist, frequent guest, who served as an advisor to former Speaker John Boehner and Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Great to have you both here. Ashley, we'll begin with you at the table because Vice President Harris is about to make this pick. How do you see it as someone who knows her well?
Well, I think that we're putting a little too much emphasis on the likability, whether or not they have a good personal dynamic.
Why is that?
Well, I just think that she's so malleable. She's such an easygoing person. And, you know, Obama and Biden didn't have a good dynamic. Biden and Harris didn't have the best dynamic going in, but they've proven to be great governing partners. So I think she's going to prioritize, who can I be a great governing partner with? Who's bringing something to the table? I'm putting my money on Mark Kelly. I think he embodies her message and her theme of the promise of America. I mean, from a naval officer to an astronaut. I don't even know that they're making astronauts anymore. It's kind of incredible. But he's also a border state senator, so he can help push back on the Republican narrative and misinformation about the status of what's happening on the border in a way that I think no one else can. The other thing that he has going for him is his wife's story. It's an incredible story about the challenges still facing America, from political violence, right, to guns, the proliferation of guns, but also what we can do when we work together in a bipartisan way. I mean, Congress passed together Democrats and Republican legislation on guns. So I think that he's a really great choice. The other thing is I think he could play in just about any community that she needs to turn out in terms of independents, disaffected Republicans. I can see him playing very well with those audiences, and that's what she's going to need to win.
Maura, what about the Republican view of this? We just had Congressman Riggleman on, the former Virginia congressman, talking about Republicans for Harris. You know that New Jersey Shore area, Philadelphia region so well. Is a Governor Shapiro someone who could really help carry some of those traditional Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia and nearby over the top for Harris, or is somebody else on your radar?
Shapiro is very popular. You know, he has over a 60% approval rating and won the vote with that much. So it's certainly a great option for Harris to be looking at him. You know, again, he is just in his term as governor. So right now things have been good for Pennsylvania to be under his leadership. However, I think that there are other candidates, like Ashley mentioned, Mark Kelly. Again, for people who are in the not a fan of Trump, but still vote Republican, they're looking for some other option because, quite frankly, but Harris has a pretty progressive record. She's quite liberal. So to have somebody who would balance her out, like a Mark Kelly, I think is a very viable option for people who are in the moderate camp, the independent camp, looking to have an option come November. So I think for this area, but also for nationwide, there are ways to pull on different things that Mark Kelly has in his record. But, you know, the law enforcement background that he has is also something that can tap into when you're talking about some of the more controversial policy decisions and rhetoric that Kamala Harris has used. So he can balance her out in a way that I think would be effective. But again, you know, Shapiro is also a good option. So it'll be interesting to see what she chooses any day now ahead of this week.
Ashley, you've worked with the vice president when she's been vice president. What has frustrated her about the job? What does she love about the job? And how might that influence how she makes her pick?
Well, you know, that first year when I was working for her, you know, when you're working for an 80-year-old, no disrespect to the president, but when you're working for an 80-year-old president, you're spending every day preparing for the day when you're going to be president. Because the reality is it could happen at any moment, right? It could happen in 23 minutes, right? And so that's the point we used to drive home for her. And so I think, you know, she spent those first 2 or 3 years in the presidential briefings with the president, kind of shadowing him to the point at which I think reporters were asking her, what's up with her standing next to him all the time? But she was literally learning the job in real time from him, and really at this crisis point for the nation. So she walked away prepared and ready day one. I think the aspects of the job I think she probably disliked when I worked for her is that we were in the middle of COVID. And she wasn't able to get out and touch and feel people. She's been spending the last year actually doing that, going into communities. I think 25 states recently, they said 60 to 70 communities she's been in. So she's really getting to understand the very plight of the American people, what's concerning them in a way that we didn't that first year because we were just trapped in the, in the White House.
Maura, I want to play a clip from Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. Let's listen.
I think whoever she chooses, the problem is going to be Kamala Harris's record and Kamala Harris's policies. The American people are suffering because Kamala Harris keeps on making bad decisions. I don't really care who she chooses as a running mate. It's not going to be good for the country. And we're ready, meaning President Trump and I are ready to take the case to the American people that Donald Trump delivered peace. He delivered prosperity. Kamala Harris has delivered an open border and skyrocketing inflation.
What do you make of Senator Vance, Maura? He's been on the scene now for a few weeks as the running mate for former President Trump. Is he someone who's activating Republicans or turning them off? And what's your assessment as a strategist?
So choosing J.D. Vance does not add to the pool of Republican voters who would be willing to go over to the Trump side, who, whether they hold their nose and vote for Trump. Picking J.D. Vance doesn't entice anyone. That was a MAGA pick, and I don't think that it was thought through well enough, quite frankly, but the points that he's making there aren't wrong, right? The economy is going to be the number one issue that people are focused on when it comes to November. And that's going to really be important for the Harris campaign and whoever she chooses to really hone in on how they're going to resolve things and why they should be, given a chance in November. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump can push on the economy. Down ballot races for Republicans would be effective to do so as well. Talking about safety and security, probably coming up as the number 2 issue, tied, I'd say, with women's rights. So again, there are these are the top 3 issues that I think that people need to be focused on. But J.D. Vance is not someone who, has been credible as far as his position stances. They've really ran the gamut. And so his point about manufacturing, bringing that home, that's important. But as far as the big tent party and, inviting, enticing Republicans who are, more moderate. No, I don't think he's done that effectively. But, there's still time before November, so we'll see what happens.
Ashley Etienne and Maura Gillespie, thank you so much for stopping by. We always appreciate hearing from both of you. Meanwhile, the U.S. sends more warships and fighter jets to the Middle East, where negotiations stand as tensions rise where do negotiations stand as these tensions rise between Israel and Iran? We'll find out more coming up next on America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For a 1-hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
an original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. is now engaged in, quote, intense diplomacy around the clock as fears mount over a wider war breaking out in the Middle East. 10 months into the conflict in Gaza, tensions have reached an all-time high after both the senior Hezbollah commander and Hamas's top political leader were killed in Lebanon and Iran last week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is prepared for anticipated counterstrikes. Secretary Blinken today urged all parties in the Middle East to take steps to, quote, ease tensions.
Escalation is not in anyone's interests. It will only lead to more conflict, more violence, more insecurity. It is urgent that all parties make the right choices in the hours and days ahead.
CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis is at the State Department. Olivia, thanks for being here. What details can you tell us about these, quote, intense diplomatic efforts by Secretary Blinken?
Sure. Well, yes, the U.S. is pulling all of the diplomatic levers it has right now with its Western partners, with Arab partners, with its Israeli partners to try to dial down tensions that have sharply escalated since those Israeli strikes in Lebanon and Iran on Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. The secretary is saying today that the message is simple. All parties need to demonstrate restraint and make the right decisions today. And a key way that he says the U.S. is working to make that happen is by trying to further those ceasefire talks in Gaza because it will be hard, if not impossible, to achieve diplomatic breakthroughs on any other front, whether with Lebanese Hezbollah or the Houthis in Yemen, absent a cessation of hostilities in Gaza. Of course, that looks right now to be a long shot. Talks over the weekend between an Israeli delegation and the Egyptian delegation broke up within a matter of hours, and there's well-reported rifts between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his national security establishment, who are worried that the Prime Minister is not actually interested in arriving at a deal. Of course, this follows a tense phone call that we learned about between President Biden and the Prime Minister that basically indicated that the U.S. is really pushing for a ceasefire that may not come in the coming days.
Olivia, we are learning more about a suspected rocket attack at an airbase in Iraq. Tell us more about what you're hearing.
Sure. Well, the U.S. does not have complete clarity on who may have fired those rockets, but we did hear moments ago from a Pentagon spokesperson who said that there was a suspected rocket attack today on U.S. and coalition forces at Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. And the initial indications are that there were some number of U.S. personnel injured in that attack. Again, we don't know who launched the attack. We don't know how serious the injuries may be or how numerous they may be. But this was the worry that Iranian proxies potentially may have ensnared the U.S. in a broader response in this sort of escalatory spiral. This is, of course, the first time that U.S. personnel have been directly injured, apparently, since 3 U.S. service members were killed by a drone attack on a base in Jordan that resulted in 3 deaths and was apparently the work of an Iranian-backed militia. The U.S. took retaliatory strikes on positions in Iraq and Syria thereafter. And so there's a real concern that even as the full-scale retaliation that all are expecting to happen from Iran and its proxies in the coming days has not yet happened, the U.S. is already being drawn in a direct fashion by this rocket attack in Iraq.
And Olivia, back to Secretary Blinken. He delivered his remarks today not long after President Biden met with his national security team to discuss what's going on in the Middle East. What do we know about that meeting?
Sure, we know that it took place this afternoon, and it involved all of his national security leadership to discuss the latest intelligence on what the U.S. knows about the coming days and what potential scenarios for its involvement may be. We know the diplomatic efforts have been to assemble a coalition of countries potentially to come to Israel's defense. Back in April, when Iran unspooled its attacks on Israel, you recall the Jordanians actually took steps to shoot down incoming rockets. The president spoke with King Abdullah of Jordan today. We're still waiting on a readout from that call and whether the U.S. has assembled as willing a coalition this time around.
Olivia Gosses, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Migrant crossings continue to plunge at the southern border, now to a 4-year low. What could happen next on the border? We'll learn more. You're streaming America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded 1-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
How fast do you think you were going?
195 miles an hour.
This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Regular asylum processing could soon be restored at the southern border as unlawful migrant crossings decline. Internal Border Patrol figures obtained by CBS News show crossings dipped below 1,500 yesterday, but the weekly average still stands at nearly 1,600. If it falls under this figure, the president's partial ban on asylum claims will be deactivated 14 days later. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez is in Tempe, Arizona. Camilo, thanks for being here. Unlawful border crossings last month did fall to their lowest number in nearly 4 years. So what is the president's next step? What is the administration doing?
Well, Bob, there's been such a dramatic drop in illegal crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border that, as you underscored, the Biden administration is making preparations as we speak and internal plans to lift that partial ban on asylum claims that President Biden issued through his executive authority back in early June. And that is the policy again, Bob, that Biden administration officials and Democrats have been crediting for this steep decline in unlawful migration at the U.S.-Mexico border. We have not seen this level of illegal immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border in nearly 4 years since the last months of the Trump administration. And again, Biden administration officials had been arguing this policy is the leading catalyst behind this massive drop, alongside scorching summer temperatures along the border and also Mexico's efforts to stop migrants. And the administration is preparing to lift this policy, but it is important to note, Bob, that even if this threshold is reached of 1,500 rather, of a weekly average of crossings, the administration still has another asylum restriction that is set up in 2023 that will disqualify most migrants who are not from Mexico from asylum. That will remain in place.
What's the latest reporting on the administration's handling of migrant sponsorship in that policy front, especially with the administration's concern about possible fraud?
Well, Bob, the administration has tried to take a multi-pronged approach to unlawful immigration at the border. They are certainly cracking down now, even more so than at the beginning of the administration, by implementing these tougher asylum rules. But at the same time, Bob, they are also expanding legal opportunities for migrants to come to the U.S. with a sponsor or through another mechanism in a legal, again, and safe fashion. And one of those ways is a program that allows Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans to fly to the U.S. if they have sponsors. 30,000 people a month have been benefiting from this policy, but the administration has now put a pause to it and has stopped issuing new travel permits under this policy because of concerns about fraud among sponsors. The U.S. government has been detecting, Bob, that many would-be sponsors are applying to sponsor multiple immigrants at the same time, which they take as an indication that there could be some fraudulent maneuvers here at play. And so for now, this policy, which again has been a pillar to the administration's broader immigration agenda at the border, will be paused for the time being.
CBS News polling shows many Americans believe border crossings would increase if Vice President Harris won the White House and decrease under former President Trump should he win another term. As a reporter, how do you assess that polling, and how is that affecting how some of your sources, right and left, are looking at this issue?
Well, I think what that tells us, Bob, is that former President Donald Trump and his hardline immigration agenda are well known throughout the country. I think most Americans know even those who do not follow this issue closely, that former President Trump, that is, had a very robust immigration agenda and enacted numerous restrictions on legal and illegal immigration. And make no mistake, he has promised to undertake a radical shift on this issue if elected in November, including by conducting the largest deportation operation in U.S. history, ending birthright citizenship, and militarizing the border by deploying the National Guard in the military there. But it is important to note that even if Vice President Harris succeeds President Biden, we should not expect a dramatic shift in U.S. border policy. I spoke to Harris's campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, a week ago, and she signaled to me that President Biden's partial ban on asylum claim, that policy we were just talking about, is likely to remain in place if Harris is elected, despite pressure from some more progressive Democrats and advocates who are very concerned about the administration's pivot on asylum. Bob?
Camilo Montoya Galvez, as ever, on the trail, reporting for us near the border, keeping us informed on all these important issues. Thank you so much. And that does it for us today here on America Decides. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for August 5th, 2024. I'm Jeff Glor, in for John Dickerson. A hurricane makes landfall in Florida, and a different kind of storm churns on Wall Street. We'll start with today's sell-off.